We've been talking for 12 years.
Frederic Casagrande is a result-driven leader with over 25 years of expertise in strategic project, programs, and portfolio management. He has a proven track record of setting up and operating PMOs and program controls within dynamic international environments. He has held multinational roles and led teams overseeing portfolios worth billions of dollars across a variety of industries, including nuclear projects, post-merger integrations, ERP deployments, infrastructure, and system integrations. Recognized globally, he has been nominated and won prestigious awards, including the PMO Global Alliance Europe PMO Leader of the Year. He's passionate about fostering collaboration and achieving excellence. Joining us on the Impact Nexus is Frederic Casagrande. So Fred, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Obi.
Yeah, it's been 12 years in the making.
12 years in the making, yeah. We were just reminiscing.
Yeah, seriously. So I think I would like to start the conversation around who Fred is, and I'll tell you why. When I explore, and we've known each other for a while, and when I explore the classification or presentation of yourself on LinkedIn, it's gone from the expertise in the PMO domain to a global strategic leader to a change agent. Like I just like different dimensions of who you are. Are those the same, revealed differently? Like, who is Frederic Casagrande?
Well, I think all those aspects that you're mentioning are different manifestations of the same reality at different level. And this is something that you would expect to see from every career progression of somebody who's a junior and starts, delving into project management as a project team member, then becomes a project manager, program manager, portfolio manager, PMO. I think it's a normal progression of looking at problems and identifying and implementing solutions.
That evolution has to be reflective also in your presentation, right, to the outer society. What I love about working with you, or having worked with you and having known you for all these years, is the strategic perspective. On the way here, we were discussing around strategy. Is it simple to close the gap between strategy and execution? And how simple is it? Because I'm seeing more and more people have the catchphrase on their LinkedIn, "We bridge the strategy execution gap." And I'd like to know your perspective around that gap and really how simple is it to bridge that gap?
Well, very clearly, there is a global gap between strategy formulation and strategy execution that consistently every organization in every industry of every size in every geography struggles to close. And that's the beauty for people like us whose mission is to close that gap. It's everywhere.
But it's a big promise, right?
We close the gap is a very big promise, right?
I mean, literally to have the mandate. You said also our mission is to close that gap. Isn't that's like a heavy load to carry, or
it's a heavy
proposition?
Burden. It's a very heavy burden, but if this is not what we aim for, then what is our purpose? What is the impact that we're having on the world, right?
When you refer to we, do you refer to we as a PMO practitioner, we in the project space, we as leaders in an organization? Like, who carries that promise of bridging that gap?
Well, I would say to start with the three of us around the table, right? I mean, we all the people who are like us, or who aim to be like us, or who aspire to be like us. I think in the project world, it's not just about delivering deliverables and closing a project. The purpose that we have in the world is to drive impact, right? Now, there is no surprise that the name of this podcast is Impact Nexus, but I think it's very purposeful. And the biggest impact is taking the formulated strategy of an organization, whether it's a company, whether it's a country, whether it's anything, right? The formulated strategy is the purpose of the organization. And delivering that purpose is the only thing that matters in the end. Otherwise, you're delivering something else, which is not the purpose of the organization. So the only mission all of us should have is to close the gap between strategy and execution.
It kind of reminds me of the story we hear of the janitor in NASA,
Yeah.
Who was asked of the question, what do you do here?
I think it was Kennedy, right? Kennedy was visiting NASA at one day, and he saw a janitor who was here, cleaning the floor with his broom. He's like, and you, sir, what are you doing here? I'm putting a man on the moon.
I'm putting a man on the moon. One thing I've understood, or I begin to see more and more in the project management domain, and I don't want to cut to projects because I want to really explore your presence in the strategy sphere and closing that gap. But one thing I've noticed a lot is a lot of project managers aren't really concerned about putting a man on the moon or about why the company exists. They are concerned about just getting things done. Should they really care about the strategy of the organization?
Well, I think, yes, they should care about what is the strategy. They should care about why they exist. They should care about why projects exist in an organization. But there are so many breakdowns in the chain that the context makes it easy for everybody to forget and focus on, okay, I need to deliver projects. I need to plan projects. I need to manage risks. So, we focus on the tactical aspects of our processes and we forget about the man on the moon. Stuart.
Yes.
Yeah, so Stuart.
Easton?
Easton, yes. Stuart Easton always uses the parable of the ducks. And in every presentation that he gives, there are ducks. Why? Because we should not care about ducks. We should care about the egg. The egg is the reason why we exist. The ducks are the means to an end. So PMOs, processes, systems, hierarchies, organizations, all of those tools and techniques exist only to provide the organization with an egg. The egg is the formulated strategy.
Yeah. Like in the previous conversation that we had, we talked about really how difficult is it to lead project managers, in terms of delivering projects and focusing on the bigger picture. I still want to consider and put myself in the PM's role. I am here on a fixed contract to deliver ABC. Nobody cares about me after 12 months when my project is over and I have to go. I'm on a tight deadline, given constraints that don't even make any sense, not realistic whatsoever. I don't even have the right resources to get the job done. Isn't that placing too much burden? And how practical is it for even the PM? How does that even manifest? The PM caring about strategy or about the direction of the organization versus why he's hired?
Well, is it easy? No. Is it a burden? Yes. But humor me. Wouldn't,
Gladly.
with all the constraints that you have to navigate within as a project manager, whether you're contracted or whether you're permanent employee or regardless, doesn't it make you a better project manager, or doesn't it put you in a better position to deliver, to understand the why?
You could argue that it does. I'm thinking, I don't know if the right word is self-sabotage. What if I find out that the why isn't really connected to the greater purpose of the organization?
Or there is no purpose as well.
Or there is no purpose.
Yeah, for example, the organization is not focused. They might think that they have a strategy, but actually it's kind of spread.
Yeah.
The
But
focus.
in that case, you have a duty to raise the flag, right? You don't have a duty to take decisions. So if you identify that the project is loosely or not linked to the company's strategy, raise the flag, guys.
Yeah, I think one thing we've seen over the years working on large-scale transformational projects is you have a lot of project managers or consultants who are seeking to extend the life of the contract or the life of their presence. So it may not be necessarily to their advantage. And I guess this touches on the ethics of project management or of the practice, right?
Absolutely. And, it's your own personal integrity and your own personal accountability. So this, again, it's a personal journey. So, you work, You work in a 9 to 5, you work as an entrepreneur and you work, 24/7. It's your choice, it's your integrity. And in the end, you make your own choices. You make your own choices to deliver what matters to the organization, what matters to the world, or to deliver the thing that your boss asked you to deliver. You know it's not going to make any difference. It's not going to drive any impact. So I think, I will always remember when I passed my PMP a while back, 2007.
2007.
You had to sign the Code of Ethics and Conduct. There was a lot of things in there, or things that are extremely valid and that still resonate with me. But one of them was, if you see something unethical, you have to notify and resign. I'm like, yeah, but who's going to pay my bills?
No, it's
right?
not true. Yeah.
So what I'm saying is it's your personal integrity and your duties to everything and everyone. You're a father, you're a husband, you need to provide. So you always have to navigate through potentially opposing constraints and navigate through that. So yes, maybe it's less ethical to manage a project that doesn't deliver any value. I raise the flag to the sponsor, I raise the flag to the organization through the reporting, through the PMO and everything. I still am asked to deliver that project in this fashion. What can I do?
But at the end of the world is small, right? We know the community, our project management community. We know everyone. If you work with someone amazing who has that impact sense in delivering the project, you would hire him again or her.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the same case, I believe, with you two guys, right? How many times you work together. But if someone is not delivering, not thinking about the strategy or the value, or just looking to the task to be done, hopefully, in the best case scenario, you would think and then you would compare to someone else who you would know.
When we used to prepare people for the PMP back in the days, that aspect of the code of ethics used to really bother people. Like, are you sure we should do this? I mean, are you sure the answer is this because we do it this way in the organization? There was this conflict, in the minds of practitioners. If we get back to this strategic conversation, so organizations exist for a purpose, right? There's always a why behind why we exist. Now, what exactly is the gap? Is the gap that is it that we're not making money? Is it that we're not in the right marketplace that we should be operating in? Because when we talk about closing the gap, what exactly is the gap?
The gap can be many things, right? So the gap can be any combination of a bad strategy, right? It could be loosely formulated. It could be formulated in a way that cannot be executed. And sometimes you see strategic statements. You kind of understand what they meant when they were around the table, but it's like, it's impossible for me, with all my years of experience, to imagine how it manifests. And if I cannot imagine how it manifests, I cannot create a vehicle to deliver it, right? So regardless of how powerful your project management engine is, you will not be able to close the gap because the formulation of the strategy is the problem. So the gap needs to be closed here. If you identify that gap, how to close the gap is to bring project people into the boardroom or whatever the committee is.
As a touchy subject, okay?
Yeah. I know it's a touchy subject, but this is, so on the way to the recording, we had that conversation about, is it simple to close the gap? And I said, yes, it's very simple to close the gap. Simple and easy are two completely different notions. So if you identify this gap, closing the gap is very simple. Bring the project people into the room when people are formulating the strategy.
Yeah, so I'm hearing a lot of thought leaders in the space now pushing that notion that the PMOs and project managers deserve a place in the room, a seat at the table is what it's called. But there are different schools of thought that you need more than just project acumen to deserve a seat at the table.
So I'm not saying we deserve a seat at the table as PMO professionals. What I'm saying is, if you want to close that identified gap, it is the only solution. And that doesn't mean that we should be involved in formulating the strategy, but we should be empowered to raise the flag and say, guys, this statement as it is formulated cannot be delivered.
to validate and to confirm the strategy statement.
Right?
You mentioned the key word there, empowered, because that empowerment is probably the gap that exists in a lot of project spheres, which is they are at a level, but they're not a level whereby they can actually exert any level of influence. So if it's that simple to close the gap when you have empowered individuals, why are we not empowering more PMOs?
Well, we're not empowering the right people at the right levels, right? Because, again, the people who have the power to empower do not understand what the gap is.
Sounds like a catch-22 to
It
me.
is completely, that's why I'm saying it is not easy. And that's why most companies are not able to close that gap. Because I think it might be another manifestation of the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's if you knew that you needed the PMO guys in the room when you formulate your strategy, you would formulate a strategy yourself that could be executed. Yeah. But the fact that you do not recognize that gap is closing your mind to the fact that you should empower those people to sit and challenge you. It is simple as opposed to complex. Is it easy to do? No, because those guys who need to sit in that room will never be allowed in that room. For cultural reasons, political reasons, like many, many different reasons, all of them are human reasons, right? It's ego-driven. It is never a systemic problem that says, well, that guy doesn't know how to open this door and sit at that table. No. If you let that guy come, he will sit, and he will help you fix the problem. End of the story, problem solved. For this identified gap, right? The gap can be of many different natures. So it could be a gap of purely alignment, meaning you have a sound strategy, well formulated, and then it's published. And then you have a running portfolio of projects, and then you're trying to align those projects to the strategy, right? We've seen that in many organizations we worked in. There is a 5-year strategic plan, and that 5-year strategic plan is actually changing every year. So it's still a 5-year strategic plan, but not the same strategy as last year. But you started projects that are 2, 3, 4, 5 years long.
What happens to them?
Yeah. So those projects should be reassessed against the new strategic objectives. But we can't do that because that means your pet project is at risk. And then how do you justify the investment that we've made already on that project? This is where we go into ego and executive courage, right?
The Saudi conference, I think in 2023, you were talking about sunk cost. It looks like there's this emotional attachment to projects. So even when you perform the exercise and realize that we probably shouldn't be running this project, why is it so difficult to let go?
It's the same problem as, when a project starts reporting red.
Okay, when you say reporting red, what does that mean?
So when you look at a project, you do the monthly performance report. You have, usually the traffic light reporting, red, amber, green. So green, it's on track. Amber, it's at risk. And red, it's off track. Well, if a project reports red, the project manager usually gets very nervous about his job. The sponsor gets very nervous about his seat in the executive table. So everybody is looking at that as a risk or an admission on failure of themselves.
So true.
When all it is, guys, we have a problem, right? So how I read red, amber, green. Green is move on. Next project, there is nothing that justifies spending the time of the executives, because sometimes you have to put things in perspective. When you have 20 SVPs, C-levels and everything in a room that spends 1 hour discussing projects, that meeting has a cost to the organization. So you need to make the best use of those executives' time and focus on, exceptions. So the reds, the ambers, and, the reprioritization, decisions that matter. So amber means, okay, we're not exactly on track, but as a project manager, I still have stuff up my sleeves and I can recover. So it's an early warning system that tells you things might get off track if I don't manage to recover them, but I still have a plan. Red is, I need you.
I'm just going to hold you right there because I love what you said. Red is, I need you. Yeah. I've been having conversations with executives in the past and their classification of the traffic light is summarized as the following: green, good; red, bad. By all means, avoid red. And that acknowledgement that I need you is probably what they should be saying, because red is not necessarily a negative or a bad indicator.
Absolutely.
It's an acknowledgement of...
It's an acknowledgement that the problems that So look, projects encounter problems. If they didn't, we would not need project management. They would happen naturally. Yeah? They don't happen naturally because stuff happens.
That's why we're paid the big bucks.
Exactly. That's why you need project managers that are competent to foresee those challenges with risk management and manage those challenges when those risks happen.
And the ability to communicate the challenge.
And when it becomes red means I've exhausted everything I have in my arsenal. It is no longer within my remit to fix the problem. I need help. More resources, more money, more visibility, decisions, repriority, you name it. But it sits around the executive table. It's no longer with me.
Is there a need to re-educate project leaders and project stakeholders on the meaning behind this? Because a lot of times when we set up the framework and the governance structures, we kind of assume that the executives understand what the red, ambers, and greens mean, and not really explaining to them that, listen, this is a call for help when you get to see this.
So this is where there needs to be education, right? But that education needs to be starting with the executives, not with the project world. Because even if as a project manager, I define that, this is what red means, this is what amber means, this is what green means. If you as an executive perceive it differently, it is your perception that counts, not mine anymore. So I'm telling you, no, but it's just because I need help. No, you made us look bad, so you know what? You're fired. That's the culture of the organization that is either conclusive to raising the flag or inconclusive to raising the flag. Yeah? And when you create a company culture that is inconclusive to raising flags, you create an organization where we swipe things under the rug and everything is green. Everything is,
different
Care
shades
Bears,
of green.
and a week before closure, suddenly it's red and I need 2 more years.
Bow wave. Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. You've heard the statement, it's culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Culture eats strategy for breakfast,
Maybe
absolutely.
culture eats governance and projects for breakfast
It's
as well.
everything for breakfast. And it is extremely difficult to change. And it's only by changing it that you enable those performance indicators to move. We've worked together in the nuclear industry, right? Nuclear is a world where you want bad news to travel faster than good news. Yeah? We had a chief nuclear officer whose motto it was, I need bad news to travel faster than good news. If something starts looking like it's going to be red, I want you in my office in 10 minutes to tell me. Right? What did that person do? He created a culture where you could actually knock on his door, enter his office. There would be shouting and there would be, unhappiness. No one likes the bad news. Mm-hmm. But he could guarantee that there would be no adverse consequence on your employment because you came and raised the red flag and said, something bad is going to happen.
Not necessarily, and I mean that was a cultural shift. Like when you have that mandate from the top, that eases the experience of the PMO. It makes governing, it makes even implementing projects easier. Earlier on the bike ride this week, I was chatting with a new PMO manager who was talking about how he's he's mandating so much. And we were riding the bike and he was like, I'm calling for steering committee meetings and so on and so forth. And I had to ask him, who's behind you? Who has your back? Because it sounds like you're doing a lot, and left to me, I wouldn't attend any of these meetings. And he's like, no, the CEO, has my back. Like, how important is it for delivery teams or PMOs who are trying to bridge this gap, who are trying to, enable projects, have the right backing, behind them?
So I've seen I've seen many different scenarios, right? I've seen scenarios also that change over time. So I've seen organizations where a PMO was created to resolve a specific kind of problems. And that PMO was sitting at a certain level in the organization, where clearly it was not empowered to impact the organization. And then it is really up to the humility and the courage of the executive to make use of this tool. So again, it's a catch-22. So you need a PMO leader who's capable of demonstrating what the value can be. And here we have many different frameworks that can help young PMO leaders to understand how to demonstrate that value. I mean, the PMO Global Alliance, PMI Certified PMO Practitioner, the value ring talks about perceived value, right? So there is the value and there is the perceived value. So a typical example or parallel I'm doing with sickness. When you have a headache, you will take painkillers.
Painkiller.
Yeah. So the painkiller will treat the symptom. So the immediate perceived value is very high. But if you have an infection, you can pump yourself with painkillers. It's going to work 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. And then the effect, your body becomes numb on the painkiller effect. So the pain comes back and the infection becomes worse. Meaning that perceived value that is very high at the beginning fades, and then you need something else. And the problem is many PMO leaders they find hooks, like, they provide reports and this and that has a very, very high perceived value at the very beginning. The second month, it's the same report because a report is a report, right? RAG status, risks, issues, cost performance, blah, blah, blah. Then at some point, 2-3 months later, it's like, so we're paying all those guys just to do reports?
So it's possible that they had the right strategy for the first 90 days or the first 60 days.
90 days is not a strategy.
But they had the right approach in terms of, let's quickly put out the shiny things and let's get some quick feedback.
And you need that, right? Because the alternative is to cure the headache is you take antibiotics, right? So it will kill the infection after 7 days, but your pain is going to grow higher and higher for the first 3, 4, 5 days, meaning zero perceived value at the very beginning. After 7 days, very high perceived value. So in the PMO space, what it means is we're going to fix the structural problems and enable the organization to deliver the things that matter. But you're going to suffer for 9 months because everything is going to be red.
No one wants it.
No one wants it. You're out in 6 months. Although the real value would be 3 months later only.
And you know what happens after 6 months? We hire another PMO manager to repeat the same cycle.
You bring in a consultant or whatever, and it's a cycle. So do both. Start taking antibiotics and take a painkiller, right? So you will have the immediate perceived value that is very high while the antibiotic kicks in.
Let's break it down because I fear that some of our guests and audience may just listen to this aspect of the podcast and just hear you talking about taking antibiotics and at the same time. So let's break it down for a PMO manager on the job.
For a PMO manager on the job, you will have tools that will deliver immediate perceived value, but not sustainable. You need them. And you will have tools that are much longer to be put in place and will deliver perceived value much later and not immediately. You need them as well. You need both so that what happens over time is the perceived value of the immediate tool is very high while the other one is very low. And while one is ramping up, the other one is fading. So you always have a cumulative perceived value of the PMO that is high enough to justify your existence. This is a simple example with 2 tools. Now you multiply 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tools, and you manage to constantly keep a volume of perceived value that is high enough for the organization to not challenge your existence. There is no worse place for a PMO than, why are we paying those guys again?
And in that instance, you see a lot of PMOs struggling to try and validate their existence.
Absolutely.
And what I love about what you talked about is you did not prescribe a specific tool or a specific what the PMO has to do. Because a lot of times we get lost in that copying and pasting syndrome.
And also it will not work in all cases, right?
Right.
It's depending on the context, on the issue, on the culture.
If you remember, there was this whole conversation 12, 13, 14 years ago now on creating PMO archetypes. We all heard the control tower and everything. So even the PMO specific interest group, we had a work stream trying to define those archetypes. And at some point at that time, if you remember, there are only two types of PMO. Yours and not yours. Yeah? And that's a very, very strong statement. That means if you create the perfect PMO for your organization today, and I take everything verbatim and I put it in Obi's organization, not going to work. Because the problem statement of your organization today will be different. But it's not just not transferable from one organization to another one. It also has to stay relevant over time. And this is where most of the PMOs fail. They think they cracked the code. Like everybody's perceiving the value. Look, we did a report and everybody loved it and everybody loves us. And in 3 months' time, less people love us. 6 months' time, people start challenging why we exist. Why? Because we're still doing the same report as 6 months ago. We're not listening to how the organization has evolved. And we have not evolved with the organization.
So just talking about that concept and that vicious cycle, if I may call it that, there is no need to classify a PMO as an agile PMO. Because by the nature of what you just talked about, we have to continuously listen to the organization and evolve as the direction is changing.
If you're no longer relevant, you're dead.
Yeah, 100%. Do you think there's a growing knowledge around the value of PMOs in closing this gap, or a growing competence in PMO managers? And I'm asking this because we now have organizations like the PMO Global Alliance, recently acquired by PMI, spreading the word around PMOs and really the value conversation of PMOs and how you can position yourself.
Honestly, I would love to think so because I still consider myself as a PMO guy. Unfortunately, I don't think it is the case. I think PMOs are a buzzword. I think PMOs are at the center stage in many organizations. Like, there are countries that mandate a PMO for every organization in the government, right? You are not allowed to operate under a certain mandate if you do not have a change management office. Yes, Saudi Arabia. So you need a change management office, you need a strategy management office, and you need a project management office. But I think also, unfortunately, there is not enough maturity in the business, and I'm talking from business leaders to project professionals. And the simple fact that there is a P in PMO kind of narrows your role and what you are capable of doing to projects.
Or what you're expected to do.
What you're expected to do, right? Again, go back to empowerment. Why would I let those guys come into the boardroom? They're project guys. They're here to execute what I formulated. Not to challenge me on how I formulate the stuff.
I got them to do my bidding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, again, a PMO is a tool, right?
Dissect that some more. I love that statement. A PMO is a tool.
A PMO is a tool, exactly. If you take Stuart's analogy, it's a duck, right? So if I have a toolbox at home, it is up to my own maturity to decide which tool I use for which task. So if I decide that every screw that I'm going to screw, I'm going to do it with a hammer, it's my choice. Now, I will break walls, I will break tables, I will break screws, I will have weak foundations and shelves and everything because I'm using the wrong tool or I'm using them the wrong way.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask in terms of the PMOs and also the keeping the perception and the value valid for the organization. Most of the organization, they go with let's measure the maturity of the PMO, where we stand now, where we want to go in the future, right? How do you find them? Because it's kind of, some of them look at them just and report, another report like, oh, we are good or we will be good. But some organizations really take it seriously and really take an actions to improve the PMO, improve the value that they're delivering, the perception, the expectation, and all the rest.
I've seen it. I've rarely seen it working well because, again, the PMO operates within a given mandate. If the mandate is wrong, there is no miracle there. Like the PMO cannot fix it. So if you're a PMO that is there to monitor and control projects, you're going to do RAG status reporting mostly. You're not going to help the organization to prioritize what work needs to be done because this is not your mandate. And it is not up to you to change the mandate. I failed years and years on, and you've witnessed some of those failures,
trying to change the mandate.
And I was there, this is not what you need. This is what you need. You don't need the painkiller, you need the antibiotics. No, nobody wants the antibiotics. I was young. Now I'm a bit more flexible and I do understand that concept of perceived value. And if this is a takeaway for people who are listening, is perceived value is equally as important as the real value. Because the perceived value might be the vehicle that gets you what you want so that you can start delivering the real value.
Well, in terms of the antibiotics, to select which antibiotics do you need, is the measuring the maturity of the PMO would help?
Depends. Measuring it against what?
Mm-hmm. The current state, the future state, the practices, all of those frameworks of measuring maturity.
Yeah, but again,
coming from
if my PMO's mandate is to deliver reports, what are you going to measure the maturity of my PMO against? Delivering reports.
Yes.
Not PMO portfolio management or prioritization.
Mm-hmm.
So again, if that is what the organization needs, but that is what the organization mandates the PMO, this is what you're going to measure your maturity against, which is it's like, all our projects are doing great,
yes.
but they are the wrong projects.
Yeah.
But my project management maturity is very high.
Yes.
I think one of the reasons why and over the years, we battled and fought with the existing mandates we were given is because of the knowledge and the perspectives we carry. I see a lot of project managers, when they go for new trainings and they're back in the organization, they want to break things, they want to implement things. And I'm like, that knowledge is for you to implement it where you have the opportunities to implement it. It's new knowledge for you. It may not translate to new rules and the organization changing. But when you talk about the PMO operates and delivers to the mandate it's been given, the challenge I have is that mandate is sponsored by someone. And in a case, what we feared is that individual leaves the organization and someone with a better perspective shows up and looks at what we're delivering and is like, this PMO is
useless,
underperforming. Yeah, I was going to say another word entirely. So probably it's understanding that, listen, even though we are not delivering the mandate we were given, that threshold is not high enough. That bar is not high enough.
So the good news is there are ways to protect a PMO from that risk, right? So there is one sponsor who gets it, he leaves, the next one doesn't get it, you're dead. Could also be there is one sponsor who doesn't get it, gives you the wrong mandate. There is another guy who comes in and say, you're misused, and I'm going to move your mandate to this, and you're saved. So it's not always bad, right? Those type of changes. But to echo on what you were saying about trainings, right? Whenever you go on a training and you learn a new perspective, a new tool, a new technique, you come back and you want to make use of it, right? We went on change management practices and we're like, yeah, we're going to implement change management and it's going to be amazing. And then you arrive and no one cares about change management. And it just flops.
It's welcome. You've gone for training. Great. Now go back to work.
In the box.
Yeah.
So in the arsenal of the PMO, there needs to be somewhere a knowledge management arm. Not just to capture lessons learned at the end of every stage of a project, but to capture and disseminate knowledge in the organization, knowledge that is relevant. So Obi goes on a training, comes back all excited with new knowledge. We need to educate the organization on this new knowledge, not implement it in changing rules and everything. But how about we do debriefing sessions? We do lunch and learn. We do small pamphlets, and we distribute that by email with internal communication. We educate our leaders. Hey, did you know we send 5 people on the change management training? Change management is about this, and this, and organizations who don't do it, they go there, and organizations who do it, they go there. Are you interested to know more? And this is not only increasing the knowledge about those knowledge areas, it's also increasing the visibility of the PMO. So tomorrow your sponsor leaves. The guy who takes over heard about you already. So you sort of level the playing field already, so that if the new guy comes with a different perspective and says, those guys are useless, it is not those guys are useless because they're not capable, because I've seen all those emails. I know what they can offer. Those guys are useless because their mandate was wrong, right?
We need to fix the mandate.
We need to fix the mandate and give them a chance. So it's not wishful thinking. It's real. We've done it. It doesn't always work, right? So there is no tool that gives you a guarantee of sustainability, but there is an absence of tool that gives you an absolute certainty of death.
Yes.
Right? So if you don't do any of that, sooner or later, somebody will realize that you really are useless.
I also wanted to talk about your journey as a volunteer. You've been for so many years been volunteering for the PMI, for the PMO Global Alliance. You've seen a lot, you've heard a lot. What was the best experience of being a volunteer on the level of the advocating the PMO?
Well, I would say, still today, it's one of the best things about that whole journey of volunteering is the visibility it gave me as an individual and as a professional, right? Because I'm still today asked to come and speak on stage in various conferences because my volunteering activities gave me that stage in the first place. But when I started volunteering in 2006. PMI, became a member, was preparing for the PMP. And I started having, I was a project manager, and I started having interest in PMOs. 2006, PMOs was not a buzzword.
It was the thing. And I'm going to sidetrack you briefly, but why PMOs? Because that was super early. That's way ahead of its time.
I sort of felt already that the impact I could make on an organization as a project manager was very limited or very constrained. And the impact I could potentially have on an organization as organizational project management could be a lot higher. So I was working for a telecom operator in the Czech Republic back in the days. And I remember the CEO was touring all the offices everywhere in Europe. And every time he had one day in an office, he had a lunch with a random employee, which was a fantastic opportunity, right? And then one day my boss comes into the office and he's like telling the whole team, okay, Jim is coming next week. So I need a volunteer to sit and have lunch with him. Eastern Europe, very, the power distance is very high. So if you meet the CEO, means you're fired. Mm-hmm. I'm exaggerating, but you get the gist. So like everybody was just turning their head and not volunteering.
So you need the ambition and the courage.
Yeah, and the absence of fear, right? So the guy, he did not fire every single guy he had lunch with, right? So I was like, I put my hands up and I was like, yeah, I'm going to make the best use of that. I prepared a sales pitch to have a PMO in that organization. And so I had lunch with the guy, very nice lunch. We discussed and everything. And I did my pitch. And at the end of the pitch, he didn't buy it. They're like, yeah, I like the idea. I do understand, but I'm not buying it right now. I'm like, okay, nice try. And I went back to my job and I continued working. Month and a half later, he gives me a call.
You're fired.
I'm going to give you a chance. And I started my first PMO. So it was a bet because I've read books. I've started volunteering in the PMO specific interest group. And I joined them as a analytics director. So I started doing reports on membership and stuff like that. But I could listen and I could see and I could imagine what a PMO could become one day, And so that was my first opportunity to start a PMO. Of course, it had a very limited success because I had literally no idea what I was just PMP certified, And I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. But that also put me in the seat for the volunteering journey. So from there, the PMO, I went on the board of directors. It was a standalone organization. Back in the days, the specific interest group had specific bylaws and they were registered and incorporated organizations. Then we became communities of practice. And at the end of the communities of practice, PMI absorbed everything and basically told everybody, look, you can operate as you are. It's your bylaws, it's your money, it's your members and everything. But then you cannot call yourself PMI anymore. Or you can merge back into PMI, we'll take it from there.
But most probably being a volunteer and having a network of experienced PMO leaders, you've been absorbing the knowledge. And
it was fantastic. Yes. So we created the PMO Symposium. We ran it for like probably 6-7 years before it was handed over to PMI Central Operations. But that means, as a volunteer for an event like this, you curate the speakers who come, you curate the program, it's like the power is immense because basically you decide what all the attendees are seeing to a certain extent.
Attendees want to be on the program as well because you have the backing of a huge
Absolutely.
entity
in
PMI.
So it was enlightening. It was extremely it was taxing, right? Because we had 2 face-to-face meetings per year in the States, and we had 3 main projects during the year that was taking the whole time of the leadership team. It was the symposium. We had the PMO Accord, which was the first collaborative book on PMOs.
PMO Accord. See, collaborations didn't just start. It's been going on for decades.
It's been going on for a while. But a lot of the things that you would see today span from that time, right? A lot of the people that you see
the networks.
In the network are people who were already there, like in the IPMF earlier this year. There was one of the speakers, Yin Fraser. He was one of my speakers in the PMO Symposium in 2009. So it's like, it's great. It's a small world. So project management is a big world. PMO is a small world. And that community, you can see the same faces in those conferences. But you can see all of them grow.
I know you gave kind of like it wasn't a bleak view of the PMOs or the state of PMOs, but there's one message you were going to leave behind for aspiring PMO managers or existing PMO managers. What would it be?
I'm going to look at you guys. Hang in tight. It is not an easy job, right? But you are impact drivers, and organizations will succeed because you are here.
Maybe the last question. What is your formula of making an impact?
I would say it's courage, right? I have at least in my current job and probably in all my previous experiences, once a week, a tough moment in a meeting where I'm the only one around the table who thinks it's a very bad idea. Or am I? Because once I start verbalizing, guys, this is a terrible idea. Everybody is like, oh yeah, it is a terrible idea. But no one was actually verbalizing. So, 2 years ago, I think at some point I posted something on LinkedIn saying this year is the year of truth in project management. Flopped.
You're not Cat Williams.
No. So truth in project management, it pays off. Ultimately, it pays off sooner or later. It's hard, but at the end of the day, that's the reason why I'm still smiling doing what I'm doing, because I believe in it.
Courage.
Thank you, Fred, for coming.
Pleasure.
And sharing your experience and the thought with us and with our audience. Hope to have you soon, as we haven't finished our list of questions that we had prepared for you, and I believe we have quite a lot to open about you, your background, your personality, all that experience that you have done in your life that developed your character and
Absolutely.
you as a person and the leader. Thank you.
All right, thanks for having me, and we'll speak very soon.
Sounds good.